Kelly here, and I'm back with another video for W+9. Today we're going to be using the Wishing You stamp set, the That Is All stamp set, and then the Happy Mail. And the Happy Mail and the Wishing You just work really well together. They have a lot of different pieces that you could do a lot of things with. So I'm starting out with Memento Tuxedo black ink, and it's because I want to add a little bit of color to this banner when I'm done. So that's why I'm stamping it in that. It's Copic safe. So I'll put that in the top left corner. Now, normally when I build my cards, I do my scene first and then I stamp my sentiment out. But because I needed to know where my sentiment was going to go, so I would know where the bunnies wanted to be, I had to stamp my sentiment first. So I did switch over to the W+9 black dye ink. That's my favorite ink to stamp sentiments in. And then I'm going to be switching back over to the Memento to stamp my images that I'm going to be Copic coloring. So these cute little bunnies, I was just really looking for, I have spring on my brain. Like, who isn't ready for spring? And we didn't even have a bad winter. It was really, really mild. But spring is my favorite season. Even though I love the hot weather that comes in summer, spring is my favorite season because everything is new. Everything is blooming and beautiful, and the temperatures are, starting to come up, and you're car dancing on your way home from work. Like, spring is just my favorite. So I cannot wait for it to get here. So along with spring on my brain, I also had bunnies because Easter is coming up. So I've been a lot of bunnies, a lot of work with bunnies. And I just thought these little guys would be super cute to put them in like a little spring field. So that's what I'm doing. I put them up. I did some masking to put them on top of a little tree stump. And then I'm going to stamp just a bunch of little flowers underneath them. And at first it's going to look kind of weird because it's going to look like they're floating on some paper with random flowers floating by them. But it's not going to stay like that, so don't be nervous. I'm going to use my ink blending tool and some Lake House dye ink by W+9 to just put in a little bit of a sky, not being too terribly heavy-handed, and I'm leaving some areas white. That just gives the illusion of light clouds. So I'm making some areas darker, some areas lighter. That way it gives the appearance of, an actual sky. And then for the bottom, I'm going to use Last Leaf and the ink blending tool. And I am blending right over the flowers. I didn't take the time to mask them because I was fairly light-handed and I didn't foresee it being an issue. If you're going to be using like some pastel colors to color your flowers, you may want to take the time to mask them. Like I said, I didn't. I knew my color, the peachish red colors I was going to be picking would color it. So now we're going to move on to the Copic coloring. So I've zoomed in a little bit here. And this tree stump has a little branch that's kind of like hanging off of it. I did not mask that off or get rid of it when I stamped it. I kind of wish that I would, because now there's just like a little random leaf sticking out from behind that one bunny's tail. But I didn't, and it, just kind of is what it is. I don't think it looks too, it's almost like it's not even there, but I wish I would have taken the time to mask it off. When I was coloring the tree stump, I knew, looking at it, that the bark was going to have to be vertical. Like, the pattern for the bark was going to have to be vertical. But I also knew that in order for it to be round, I needed the edges on the outside to be darker to give it that three-dimensional look. So for a minute, I kind of struggled with how I was going to do that because I didn't want my lines to be contradictory. I didn't want them to be fighting with each other. So what I ended up doing was, in my two lightest colors, I added a lot of shading on the edges. And then I just stuck to the vertical, and I put more of the dark colors on the outside edges than I did in the center. So that way it did still have that roundness, and I still had a little bit of a highlight in the center. And these just wood grains, for some reason, is something that just kind of comes very easily for me. The key to that is not over blending them. You want them to appear to have lots of texture, and if they have lots of texture, then there's going to be lots of contrast. So don't get scared when you're doing it and really over blend them. For the bunnies, I kept both of them pretty light. I wanted the one on the left-hand side to be a white or a light gray bunny. So I'm only adding the C1 where the shadows are going to be the darkest. So underneath his arm, where his other arm is stretching back behind his little bunny buddy, say that 3 times fast. Anyway, so where the areas would be super dark, and then I did add a little bit for his, like, behind his nose to give the illusion of you know, a little bit more of a they don't have snouts, they're bunnies. I don't know what you want to call it. That was a little more elongated. There was some depth there. What is that thing called on a bunny? I don't even know. Anyway, so my darkest color was a C5, and I added this very sparingly. So where his arm would be hanging down, there would be a shadow. Where his arm is behind the other bunny, there would be a shadow. Where his neck meets, there would be a shadow. And then I just, you know, blended that all out really quick. The best tip I could give you for fur would be to use really short strokes. I know it's hard to see with the C's because everything is so light, but it'll be better to see with the browns. So maybe we'll approach that when we get to the browns. For the banner, I just used the same C markers. In hindsight, I kind of wish that I would have gave them a little bit of color, just because I felt like everything was really neutral with this card. But my intention was just to make them, you know, simple white, give them a little bit of dimension. So I was able to accomplish that with my C's pretty easily. If you watched my videos before, you know most of the time my shadows are down and to the left, so that is how I colored them the same way. And now we're going to move on to the other bunny. I opted for the C40s, which are a pretty gray brown. This one is not, I mean, it's not as gray as the 70s, but it's not as golden as the 50s either. It's somewhere in between. And I just did 3 colors because, again, you know, I was thinking pastels, keeping everything pretty light. This one, because my light source would be coming from the top right, he's going to be darker all along the left. So that is, those are where I added his shadows too, on the inside of his belly, underneath his arm. All of those areas would be darker. I was a little bit more heavy-handed in the beginning with my the E40 and the E42, but I'm going to be pretty sparing with my E44 because it's such a dark color. Oh, where his ear would fold over would be darker too. But here I'm using extremely light pressure, very, very light pressure, and I'm just doing little teeny tiny flicks of color because I want to simulate the look of real fur. And on rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, any of those, they're very short-haired animals, so they wouldn't have long sweeping what is it? The flick shouldn't be super long. That's not the way their hair looks in real life. So I'm going back from the darkest color out to my lightest and doing, you know, just kind of blending them in. That would be my other tip for coloring animals, would be try not to over blend them. They're not going to have a smooth color finish because their fur is textured. And again, with any kind of texture, there's going to be contrast. So here I just was adding a little bit of shading with the C's to his tail, since he has a white tail. And I picked a really light R to go back in and put some pink in their ears. And then for the part where his ears folded over, I used the same pink. These are the 2 colors I'm going to use for the flowers. But I used that R32 for their noses. And then where the ear would fold over, it would be darker. So I brought back the lighter pink color and just blended that out. I didn't figure that you would want to watch me color whatever 12 or 15 flowers that I have stamped down here. So I'm just going to do about 5 of them so you can see how I approached it. I used the R32 to color in all of the petals. I left the centers alone. I colored in all of the petals, and then I just went in and added almost like little dots of the R35 around the center, and then blended that back out with the R32. For some of them, I tried to keep the shading just to the bottom left. For others of them, I added shading more all around. It just depended on where the flower sat. So now that the flowers are completed, I'm going to go in and add, well, I'm going to color this little leaf thing that we talked about. That was just there. I wonder if I should have just made it like a really big tail. Probably would have looked weird. Nonetheless, it's done now. So, and I'm just going to go in and add some grass. So I already have that base down from the green leaf that we blended on. And then I'm going to start with my lightest color, which is the YG01, and just put down firm pressure and flick up. This isn't difficult. It might take you a little bit of practice to get used to it. So just do some short, long flicks on some scrap pieces of paper until you feel comfortable with how it's looking. Because again, with Copics, it's never how it starts out in the beginning. It's the sum of all its parts, how it looks on the whole. So even though it looks, on a scrap piece of paper like it's just a couple of flicks of color, when you put it all together, it's really easy to see how it comes together and looks like grass. So I didn't want my flowers to just be floating out there and nothing, so I'm using my darkest color to draw in some stems for them. And then I'm flicking even more of that darker color, like interdispersed throughout the lighter ones, so that those stems don't stick out like a sore thumb, that they blend in and it looks like a little field of flowers. I'm also going to add in just a little bit of shading underneath the tree stump, because right now it looks like it's just floating in the middle of this field, which we clearly don't want. So for scene making, you always want to make sure your images are grounded, that they're not just floating off there by themselves, chilling, hanging out, that they belong to the scene. So I used my white gel pen just to add a couple of little dots to the flowers. This is just a little bit of detail work to kind of make them more interesting. It also helped to lighten them up a little bit, because with that bold black outline, they do stick out. Speaking of an outline, I always outline all of my images. So I have a EK Success journaling pen, and I am going to outline everything with that. I start with the banner. I just find it easier to start on the top left and work my way down. For the field, again, we're talking about these, these little details that bring it all together. I still felt like my flowers were sticking out like a sore thumb. So I wanted to ease them. I wanted to give something that would detract from that big bold outline. So I'm using a souffle pen, which is dries opaque in pink, to just add in a couple of dots to give the illusion of more flowers. And that helps to take off all of the attention from those big black flowers. Here I'm using my Tombow Mono Multi-Glue, and I'm going to attach this to my white card base. Now I decided to put it on the right hand side of the card because when you look at it, the left hand side is so empty. So for some balance, I wanted to add the embellishments that I would be putting down on the left hand side, so it would kind of detract from that empty space. So here I have Candy Hearts by Basil, and then I also have some Coal Mine cardstock from W+9. I just cut a really thin strip out of that, and I'm going to adhere it there. And it's funny because like when I look at it, it almost looks like the cover of like a children's storybook. Like that would be the little binding. Because these bunnies are just so cute. They're so stinking cute, these bunnies. So I'm going to trim off the excess pink coral, whatever color we're calling it, right up against my card base, and I find it just easier to flip it over to do that. I wanted to add in some sequins. These are clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh, just to fill in those areas where the banner connects to the wishes. There was a few areas in there that needed something, and then I felt like overall the card needed just a little something extra, so I cut a super thin piece of silver glitter paper. This is Die Cuts with a View, and I added that, and then I was finally like happy with it. Like, yes, this is, everything needs shimmer, of course, so we're using our clear Wink of Stella to hit up the flowers and then the little bunny noses and ears, and then that is basically the card. So it's really simple to, kind of build your own scene. Doesn't require a lot of masking if you're not into that, although I am, just not on this card. So I hope that you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!